Hi, my name is Chris. I am a PharmD candidate from Purdue University. I'm going to talk today about sodium control. Why do we care about sodium levels? Well, the heart, blood pressure, and blood pressure are basically tied right with our sodium levels, or as most of us will recognize, I have a picture of Morton salt there, which is just normal table salt. That's where we tend to get a lot of our sodium from in our diets. Now, how does sodium affect the heart? Well, when there's extra sodium in your bloodstream, it pulls extra water into your blood vessels. And whenever that amount increases, the amount of blood inside your vessels also increase. And whenever you have more volume, you tend to also have more pressure. And there's an increased pressure on the heart. It's kind of like if you turn up the water supply to a garden hose, the pressure in the garden hose increases the more water that you push through it. So you can think about it, we have more sodium on board that pulls more water into our blood. And because we have more blood, it's going to put more pressure on our heart and on our veins. So why does this really matter? Well, over time, high blood pressure can overstretch or injure our blood vessel walls. And over time, it can speed up the buildup of plaque, which can block blood flow. And added pressure tires out the heart by working it harder. And it makes it more difficult to pump blood throughout the whole body. And just extra water in your body can also lead to bloating and weight gain. If you can see here, heart rate's is pumping pretty consistently, and it starts to slow down. It's having to work a little more difficult. It's having to work harder because it's more difficult. That's kind of what we're going to see with our heart. It's going to work our heart out a little bit more as we retain more water. That's basically one of the main reasons why we're talking about sodium, is to protect our heart. So we're going to go ahead and get into some of the main topics of why and how we can control this. We're going to look at some salt myths. We're going to learn how to monitor. We're going to talk about some unique things we can use if we're dining out, and also the DASH diet. We're going to talk about that too. Salt myths. Let's get started with these. I have 5 salt myths here that I'm going to debunk for you. Let's say someone says, I just need to cut down on my salt intake. That's how I'm going to lower my salt levels. Well, just cutting down really isn't the way to do it. What we're going to want to do is limit how much salt we take in, and we're going to limit it to under 3 grams of salt per day, which is a bit more than a teaspoon. That is going to be the absolute max that we're going to want to be taking in. Also, some people may say, salt's not a big deal. If you don't have hypertension, no worries, right? Well, eventually, someone eats too much salt, it can still lead to hypertension in the long run, and eventually a heart attack and a stroke could possibly happen also. You probably have heard on TV too, or from other friends that say Himalayan salt is healthier than table salt. Well, table salt, sea salt, Himalayan salt, kosher, all the types of salt are relatively equal in sodium content. And honestly, our table salt is also fortified with iodine, which is really good for our thyroid and how well that functions. So if you actually go for Himalayan salt, you're reducing the amount of iodine in your system. So that's something you have to look at there. And you shouldn't add any salt to your food if you suffer from hypertension. Well, that's not necessarily true either. But you would only want to add salt after tasting your food. You'd also want to opt for maybe less salt or substitutes. Or you could also go for dry herbs, adding lemon, chili, garlic, and spices for flavor instead of relying so much on salt for adding flavor. And food without salt is bland and tasteless. Well, not necessarily true. Kind of like what we were saying a few minutes ago. You can add garlic, ginger, chili, coriander, and get into these other types of herbs and spices and be adventurous. You'll be quite surprised if you start going into these other types of herbs um, that really you don't really miss the salt after you get rid of a lot of it. Monitoring. How do we monitor? Well, we're going to want to limit sodium. If we're a healthy adult without any sort of hypertension or high blood pressure, which means our blood pressure is just too high, we want to keep around 2,300 milligrams per day of sodium. Now, someone with high blood pressure, though, they're going to want to stay right around 1,500 milligrams or less. Um, One of the ways that we can do that and keep our eyes on it is to check food labels. Try to choose products that have, well, like Remy was saying, around 5% of the daily value or less of sodium itself. We can also look for foods that say low sodium, reduced sodium, or no salt added. That's going to be another way that we can monitor how much salt we're actually taking in. Now, I told you 2,300 and 1,500. That's just a number, right? How are we going to know what that is visually? Well, if we take a look here, we have some tablespoons and teaspoons here on the right, and I have some measurements here. If you are the person that has high blood pressure, you're going to want to take in around half a teaspoon to 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt per day. That's going to be your max. You're not going to want to go above that. And you can see here we have half the teaspoon and a 1 teaspoon here. So if you measure that out, you can visually see how much salt that actually is. It's really not that much. And if you're a patient that doesn't have high blood pressure, you could go for around that 2,300, but you would not want to do more than that. Next, we'll talk about some techniques you can use whenever you're dining out to try to limit your sodium intake. You can ask for nutrition, a nutrition menu before you order your meal, like Remy was saying. But I would really recommend knowing this before you go to the restaurant. Look it up on Google, know what you're going to order, know how much salt is in it. You could also ask that no salt be added to your meal. That may seem like a little bit of a nuisance depending on where you go. The waiter or the chefs in the back may not really like that, the food workers. So use that to your discretion. Also, order some vegetables with no salt added or fruit as a side item. People generally won't put salt onto just fresh fruit. So that can be a pretty safe bet for you. You can split a meal with a friend or a family member. That's always fun to do depending where you go. Maybe get something that has a little more salt in it, but split it between you and a loved one, and have something that's a little bit healthier and just kind of share. Something I really think is cool is to go ahead and order a to-go container whenever you first arrive, and half whatever you're eating exactly into, put it in the to-go container, and then eat off of your plate. And I can bet you, after you finished eating, you're really not even going to want to touch your to-go container because portion sizes are actually pretty large, and you won't end up missing that food. And then you can have it for your meal the next day. Also, try to make takeout and fast food an occasional treat. If you eat out all the time, it's going to be pretty difficult to keep a consistent tab on sodium levels in general. But these are some good tools to try to help you out there. Next, we're going to talk about the DASH diet. It's basically just an acronym that means dietary approach to stop hypertension. What does it mean? Well, DASH diet is simply a heart healthy diet. It's been shown to help prevent or lower blood pressure. And it's basically low in sodium, cholesterol, saturated in total fats, high in fruits and vegetables, fiber, potassium, and low fat dairy products. So it's full of good nutrients too. As you can see here, there are a lot of people that are creating DASH diet recipes. There are many different cookbooks like the 7-Day DASH Diet Dinner Plan, the Mediterranean Solution, crock pot recipes even for those who like to make their meals early in the day and just come home and have their meal ready. And there are also a lot of free recipes online. Something that's really interesting is you can actually have fun reducing salt in your family recipes. So maybe your grandmother has a recipe that you've always really liked, but you know it's probably not the best for you because of the amount of salt. Well, you can go ahead and try a few different spices and take out some of that salt and still enjoy that family recipe, but make it a little more dash diet friendly. And honestly, as you can see, you can almost turn any type of food in any genre of food into a Dash Diet approved recipe if you're smart about it. Got some references there where I found some of this information. Thank you for listening. And what questions do you have?